US President Donald Trump announced a new series of tariffs on imports from several countries just hours before the self-imposed August 1st tariff deadline. Phil, what are the potential impacts of these tariffs on US economic growth?
These new tariffs should largely be thought of as sort of a reshuffling of the Liberation Day tariff. They're higher on some countries, lower on others. On average, though, they're not too much lower than the tariffs that really did scare markets and result in a pretty big response in the bond market. These tariffs will increase costs for US consumers and US producers. These will also increase costs for producers. Most firms that export also import some components that go into those exports, so this will increase costs for them as well. These tariffs will reduce growth in certain key sectors. It will also shift production away from areas where we are more productive, such as high-skilled services, towards areas where we're less productive, which is things like manufacturing.
How will these tariffs impact the US trade deficit with these targeted countries?
The objective, or the rationale of these tariffs to begin with, was to reduce the overall trade deficit. Now, the trade deficit is quite large in aggregate, but it's important to note that the aggregate trade deficit is a function of our macroeconomic policy, not a function of our trade policy. Our overall trade deficit comes from the fact that we spend more than we make. The federal government borrows massive amounts of money every year, and to finance that borrowing and spending, we import goods and we export US treasuries, essentially. So as a result, because the underlying cause of the trade deficit is not trade policy, nor is trade policy the solution to that problem. Best estimates from research show that if we implemented an optimal tariff to address the trade deficit, which would be, roughly speaking, about a 13% tariff across all countries and all goods, even that optimal tariff would only reduce the trade deficit by about 12%. So this is not going to reduce the overall trade deficit very much. It may reduce bilateral trade deficits to some degree, but that will largely just reshuffle where we're importing goods from one country to another.